Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 3, Episode 10. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. On the slate for this week, the Fox News settlement. $787 million. We always get what we want, don't we, dear listener? We just don't get it in the way that we imagine it. Did Donald Trump want to see a news media outlet get slapped in the face with a huge defamation lawsuit? Yes, he did. Did he want it to be Fox News? No, he didn't. Yet he did get what he wished for. Will this have a huge impact on the media with regard to the dissemination of false information? Hell no, it won't. Hell no, it won't. Thank you to all of you that tune in every week. I do appreciate you. Please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5 stars, write a review, disseminate far and wide. Please consider supporting the podcast. This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast, is on Patreon. And you can go and lavish us with praise and money. I much prefer the money. Let's go.
Act 1. We always get what we wish for. So did Donald Trump. Fox News pays a $787 million settlement.
Be careful what you wish for, because you might just get it. I've said that in this podcast several times. I've said this in my life numerous times, probably more than I can count. It really deals with our motivations. Why do we want something so badly? Why do we desire something so gravely, so dearly? Do our desires come from this place of altruism? Are we looking to make the world a better place? Or are they a baser desire? Or are they greed? Are they lust? Are they envy? Are they revenge? Do we want what we want because we want to raise the waters? You know, the rising tide lifts all ships. Or do we want to smote our enemies? There's this great Simpsons episode. Yes, I'm making a Simpsons reference. Yes, I will continue to make Simpsons references. And I will continue to reference seasons 2 through 8 in particular. There is a great Simpsons episode. It is a Halloween special episode. I believe it's the 2nd season. It may be the 3rd. Where Homer gets a monkey's paw. And the monkey's paw grants wishes. And every time Homer makes a wish, one of the fingers of the monkey's paw closes. Well, of course, this is this is an old trope. This has been used in books, in magazines, in movies, in TV, hell, probably radio. It's a tired storyline, but it can be reused, reinvented, recrafted, if you will, so many different ways. And particularly when it's a cartoon, it can be so ingenious, so clever. So Homer has the monkey's paw. He makes wishes. Of course, he has the best of intentions in making the wishes, but the underlying desires, the underlying wants, well, they aren't so noble. They may be a little bit selfish, a little bit greedy, a little bit myopic, as always happens in these stories. The reverberation, the aftermath of the wishes coming true, they always strike fear in the hearts of the many, right? The wish on its face presents as you getting everything that you wanted, and the undertow, the unseen consequences start to come to fruition, and you realize that that dream is quickly turning into a nightmare. That should do it. That's a good 3 minutes of preamble to, yes, there was a person who wished for something and wished for something vociferously, and it came true. And in coming true, it blew up in that person's face. One Donald J. Trump, for years, before he was president and while he was president, lamented the fact that the media could, without repercussion, without any consequences, defame all sorts of different people, namely him, and get away with it, scot-free. There was nothing that the people could do. And Trump himself came out and said we might need to really tighten up the defamation laws in this country. Maybe they should be more like England and more like Europe. Oh, and the Twitterverse was lit afire. There was many a pundit, many an influencer that took exception. The topic made the media rounds for whatever the cycle is now these days, maybe, 48, 72 hours to 2 to 3 weeks, and then we moved on. Fast forward a couple of years, Donald Trump and his acolytes claimed that the 2020 election was stolen, and there was no depth to that rabbit hole. They had rigged voting machines, they had Venezuelan socialist influences, they had, corrupt microchips and all sorts of mail-in ballot fraud. Oh, it was a whole to-do. And there were some media outlets that, without much oversight, without much journalistic integrity, kowtowing to the viewership, to the bottom line, the numbers, right? How many people, how many boobs do we have in front of the television? How much ad dollars can we generate? Well, that network ran with these types of stories. So much so that it ended up in a court of law. Under what legal cause of action? Well, it was defamation. This week, namely on April the 18th, the year of our Lord, 2023, Fox News Corporation settled with Dominion, the company that had the lion's share of the voting machines, for a little over $787 million, the highest defamation settlement in American history, in U.S. history. I'm not going to belabor this point. I can't stress enough, though, how landmark that settlement is. Defamation is an extremely difficult standard to meet in a court of law, particularly when you are talking about the media, when you're talking about journalism. If I defame you and you sue me, is it a high standard for you to win? Hell yes, it is. If you are defamed by a media outlet, it is an even higher standard. And let me put this into perspective for you. Do you remember the man Richard Jewell? Richard Jewell was a security guard. He was a private contractor. He was hired as one of the many contractors during the Olympics in Atlanta. I'm not saying this in a disparaging way, but he was basically a glorified mall security guard, right? Shuttling people from point A to point B, making sure people weren't going places that they weren't authorized to go. This man heroically identified the backpack that had the bomb that ended up blowing up in the Olympic Park. And then, because of course, the FBI accused him of planning it there and then trying to make himself a hero, draw attention to himself by calling it out, he was the bomber and then what? The hero that saved the day. Quick sidebar, you know the reason why the FBI was so easily duped into this line of thinking? It's because very often the FBI sets up these criminal organizations, sets up criminal activities and crimes, and then goes and foils them and says, hey, look, we foiled this criminal activity. We foiled this crime. When in reality, it was the FBI that organized and set up the underlying act in the first place. You set up the act, and then you spoil it, and then you claim credit for having spoiled it. So they thought, hey, this guy's in on our rap. This guy's in on our game. Well, turns out that Richard Jewell didn't plant that bomb. It was a white supremacist that the FBI ended up catching, I think, 20 years later, something like that. Richard Jewell, for his part, was found guilty in the court of public opinion by the media. He was publicly perceived as guilty because of A, the FBI, and B, the media. The media, without any scrutiny as to what was being conveyed to them by the FBI, ran with the story. Richard Jewell, who was innocent and who was very likely defamed by every media outlet that reported on the story, sued many of them. Many of them settled. The outlet that did not settle, that had the most culpability out of all of them, was the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution decided to fight the defamation claim and eventually won. That was a very consistent legal standard in the United States. Richard Jewell, innocent, was sullied in the court of public opinion, namely by his hometown newspaper, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He sued that newspaper for defamation, and he lost. That is how difficult it is to win a defamation lawsuit against a media outlet when they raise the shield of journalism. Fox News ended up paying $787 million plus in a settlement for a defamation lawsuit. That is the degree to which they fucked this up. That's how bad. Not just they couldn't take it to court and win, as many other media outlets have. They knew they had so many problems. They knew that their executives, that their media pundits, that the faces of the organization were going to be so skewered in a court of law, and that they had really no defense whatsoever to the claims of defamation. They ended up settling for close to $1 billion. A good buddy of mine, who's actually appeared as a guest on this podcast, I will not name him, he would get upset on occasion when he heard about settlements in cases where he believed that the plaintiff was not worthy of the monetary settlement. And I would always tell him, if a corporation settles a case for a sum in excess of 7 figures, do not ever buy the excuse that they didn't want to spend the money on the legal fees to fight the case. Do not buy the excuse that they are afraid of the damage, the impact, the reputational risk to the brand, and so they're going to settle. If a corporation believes that it is correct, that it is in the right, that it is on the side of angels, it will spend countless dollars defending itself. Money is no object. A corporation only settles a case for 7 figures when they realize that the liability that they have is in excess of the money that they're spending in the settlement. Let me repeat that so you understand, dear listener. If a corporation settles a case and it's 7 figures, it has nothing to do with the cost of litigation, with the cost of defending itself, with the price they may pay in public perception, in reputational risk. No, if the corporation believes it's right, it will spend countless dollars. And it will do so because it is looking at its reputational risk. If we're right and we just cave in and pay, we'll have all of the sharks chasing after this blood for years to come. No, dear listener, when a corporation pays a settlement of $787 plus million, they're guilty as hell. They know they're guilty as hell. They know they have no alternative. Note, there is another plaintiff that also has a lawsuit against Fox News for the very same defamation claims under the very same auspices. It's likely that within the next year, there's going to be another settlement for $700, $800, hell, let's just say it's $500 million. Fox News carried the water, and we don't need to go into all of the reasons why they did it. I've already spoken to the fact that none of the pundits actually believe most of the things that they say on air, and really neither do any of the executives, any of the producers. It's all about capturing the audience, containing that audience, and then being able to drive advertising dollars towards them. We don't need to go over that again. Fox News carried the water for Donald Trump and his acolytes and their claims of election fraud in 2020, and Donald Trump got what he wanted. He got the defamation lawsuit that he'd always been craving. Is that the right word? Craving that he had been pining for that was brought against a media outlet. The problem, as it always is, it wasn't the media outlet that he wanted to suffer this consequence. It wasn't the media outlet that he wanted to see sullied, that he wanted to see crestfallen. The universe has a very subtle and very dark sense of humor. Be careful what you wish for, dear listener, because you just might get it.
Act 2. Will the Fox News settlement act as a deterrent to the media disseminating false information? Nope.
As strange as it is, or perhaps it isn't strange at all, the paradox is striking and sitting in front of all of our faces. So many people on the right advocating for stronger defamation laws against the media, and here we have Fox News paying out $787 million. $787 million plus. There's an additional layer to this onion that was recently reported on by, I believe it's an organization called The Lever. Is that correct? I believe it is. The reporting concerned how much money Fox would actually have to pay out of that $787 million. Now, a Fox representative came out and said something to the effect of a lot of that money, 200 and some million, maybe $250 million, $230 million, would actually be a tax write-off. That legal expenses are a tax write-off as ordinary business expenses. Yes, this is true. If you are not aware, I've had many a corporate client over the course of my legal career write off the legal fees as part of ordinary business expenses. Now, one would think that there would be certain allegations made against a corporation that would not qualify for this type of tax write-off. Those prohibitions do not exist. I believe it was Purdue Pharma. Yes, it was Purdue Pharma that wrote off a significant amount of the legal expenses they paid and the settlement they had to pay for the Oxy settlement, the fact that they knew that their oxycodone, OxyContin products were highly addictive while telling the marketplace that they weren't, and knowing that many of the doctors who were getting these massive quantities of these pills were not writing legitimate scripts. Yes, they had to pay billions of dollars, and yes, evidently they were able to write off a significant portion of that as ordinary business expense, ordinary legal expense. In addition, in the industry that I'm working in now, the insurance industry, apparently Fox News had coverage that would trigger in the event that they were sued for defamation. Most insurers are always looking for a way not to pay a claim. Given that Fox News is a news organization, and I will use that term loosely, they very likely had some sort of particular insurance coverage, a policy designed, or perhaps it had certain riders that would cover these types of allegations being made and would cover these types of settlements in light of these allegations. What allegations again? Defamation. So how do we know whether or not Fox is actually going to be out hundreds of millions of dollars because of this settlement? Well, between this assertion that $250 million will be written off on taxes and the journalistic discovery that an insurance policy may cover most of the rest, one can look to the stock market, where one always finds the attitude of people with money to how a corporation is performing or not performing, whether things that happen to a corporation are advantageous or detrimental. Fox's stock price, within the week of that announcement that they had settled the Dominion lawsuit for $787 plus million, barely moved. You didn't see a precipitous drop in the stock price. So it leads one to believe that yes, there will be a significant tax write-off, and yes, insurance is going to cover a significant portion of that $787 million. It makes it likely, in my mind, as I alluded to in the last segment, Fox has more lawsuits to deal with. If an insurance policy will cover it and they can write off the rest, we may see another settlement in excess of $700 million in the next 6 months. And we may also see such a settlement barely tip the scales of the Fox News Corp stock price. Why is that significant? Why is whether or not they pay out this money not affecting the stock price significant? Well, the fact of the matter is, you can throw around these big numbers and say that it's the biggest, it's the largest, it's the greatest defamation lawsuit settlement in U.S. history. If the company that is paying that kind of settlement has really no internal monetary repercussion, are they going to do anything differently? Is it not just another cost of doing business? Those large settlements are supposed to be a deterrent. If insurance covers it and you write off the rest on your taxes, you really suffer no reputational risk and it doesn't affect your stock price? Are you not going to do the same exact thing in 2 years, in 4 years, in 10 years? As I say on this podcast all the time, I'm not picking on Fox News. This is more a global issue. If one media outlet can go through something like this and come out after having paid $787 million relatively unscathed, does that not set a terrible precedent for the legacy media that, yeah, even if we are in a situation, even if we do find ourselves on the wrong end of a defamation lawsuit, we've got a precedent now on how we can actually weather that storm. Insurance is going to pay most of it. We can write off the rest. As long as it doesn't affect our stock price, the reputational risk is very, very low. Am I going to throw a tantrum about it? Am I going to get upset? I'm keeping in the same mindset, the same posture, the same attitude. You can see it as another brick in the wall about how things are so broken and how we're so lost. Is it not another brick in the wall of this new world order, this new consciousness that we're rising to? If this is the legacy media, if this is the way the game is played, what do? We just stop paying attention. We just ignore it. And the second we do, these organizations wither and die on the vine. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.